I was very impressed with the NCAA athletes who competed in Eugene this past weekend at the 2025 NCAA Championships. Across the board, on both the men's and the women's side, pleasantly surprised with the performances, with the high quality competition, with some of the all-time marks, the collegiate records. Men and women really did show up and show out. So let's talk about a few of these performances. And I think one of the big stories was Jordan Anthony in that 100. He, of course, was coming in having run a windy 9.75 back at the West Regionals with plus 2.1 meters per second wind. And the questions arose on A, could he actually do it again? That was one of the questions I had. And then B, would he be actually able to win the 100-meter title? There was a lot of competition that he was going up against. Abdul Rashid Saminu, you had Kalen Walker, you had Ajayi, you had so many guys who were very much in the conversation to potentially steal, quote unquote, the title away from Jordan Anthony, who on paper was probably the favorite. Well, in those semifinals, Jordan Anthony didn't look as good as you might have expected. He only qualified on time and was actually the last time qualifier entering the finals. Now, he didn't, wasn't fazed by it in any capacity. Afterwards, he said he was confident, just wanted to win that title. But it was interesting because we also saw guys like Abdul Rashid Saminu. He didn't qualify into the final, despite being the NCAA leader at 9.87 seconds. Kalen Walker, despite him running 9.94 seconds at regionals, he also didn't qualify into the final. Also, remember that 9.75 windy performance at West Regionals and all the other guys who broke 10 seconds in that round with Jordan Anthony? None of those guys qualified into the final at NCAA's either. So that was really telling as it relates to how this final was actually going to look. We did see Ajayi from Auburn. He had the fastest time going into the finals with 9.92 in the heats. And before the meet, I actually thought he was probably one that people were sleeping on. But that didn't pan out, at least for me personally. Jordan Anthony from lane 9 on the outside got the win in the 100 running 10.07 seconds. So the time by no means was fast in any capacity. And it's kind of interesting because after the 100-meter semis, he was saying that he wanted to break Tyson Gay's American record. Here's a clip.
In my mind, hopefully God, I break the American record, 969. But yeah.
Listen, shout out to Jordan Anthony, but of course that wasn't going to happen. He hadn't even broken 9.90 seconds legally. He hadn't broken 9.80 seconds legally. So there was no way, in my opinion, that he was suddenly going to jump to, sub 9.7 seconds to run at least 9.68 seconds. Wasn't going to happen. And of course, the performances on Friday showed as much. But I think this does speak to how Jordan is able to at least remain composed, remain focused, and execute when it matters the most, despite what else might be going on around him. He was all the way on the outside in lane 9, and that can get to an athlete's head. So Jordan Anthony, with the ability to, again, be the final time qualifier, go into those finals running out of lane 9 and actually capture that win, very impressive performance that, in my opinion, definitely deserves some respect. But the big question after that is, what will he be doing going forward? Will he actually go back to school and compete in football? Will he actually go to USA Championships to try and make the team to Worlds? Well, Jordan answered these questions and he announced that he is actually foregoing the remainder of his college eligibility and choosing to go pro to seemingly run track and field. Now, this is a very interesting decision because I think on the surface, many people actually expected Jordan Anthony to remain in school and to continue playing football, specifically because of the money that he would be, almost guaranteed through NIL deals and, opportunities on that end. Whereas in track and field, especially going professional, you're not guaranteed as much money as you would make, continuing to compete in college with all the money that's, starting to flood into there, especially on the football end. Yes, Jordan Anthony will probably, if he hasn't already, maybe behind the scenes, signed a professional contract with a major shoe brand in some sort, but that's not a guarantee that he's gonna make it on Team USA to World Championships this year, either individually in the 100 or 200, or even, in the relay pool. We saw someone like Christian Miller finish 5th place at USA's last year and wasn't selected for the Olympic relay pool. So there's no guarantee on that aspect. Number 2, this is a World Championship year, but if he doesn't make the team, 2026 is an off year. So there's no major championship for him to actually go and qualify for. Yes, there is the World Ultimate Championships, but that's going to be a little bit different where defending world or Olympic champions, they get a spot at the World Ultimate Championships. Also, then it goes by world ranking, and then some other, invitations are sent out in different capacities. Jordan Anthony isn't in that pool yet because he's only been running in the NCAA. Now, you will also have Grand Slam track returning in 2026, so he may very likely get selected for that, especially considering he's both a 100 and 200 meter threat, breaking 10 seconds and 20 seconds in both events respectively. But on the surface, it just doesn't seem like Jordan Anthony focusing on a pro track career financially would be comparable to focusing on NIL deals and money while competing as a football player in the NCAA. But as I kind of thought through it, because on the surface it may not seem like a great decision, I actually think that I'm weighing out what might be good for Jordan and what he actually might be thinking of. Maybe this has been one of his goals for his entire career, where he was like, I want to become a professional track and field athlete. I want to compete individually around the world and potentially achieve individual success. Now, he can achieve success in different ways as part of a team playing football, whether it is at Arkansas in the NCAA or eventually, playing for the NFL. But I do think that there is something slightly different about competing in track and field as an individual, as well as traveling overseas to different cities that you usually, if not ever, would get the opportunity to do if you're competing, in the NCAA or in the NFL in the United States. You don't get to travel to Europe, to Africa, to Asia, or Australia, or all these different continents, and then all these different countries where track and field, whether it's large or whether it's small, does have a presence that really is relatively accepting of certain athletes. Now, I'm not saying that Jordan Anthony is going to become this massive athlete like a Noah Lyles, a Sha'Carri Richardson, Letsile Toboho, a Femke Bol, right? None of that is what I'm saying. But I do think that there is something to be said on maybe this was one of his goals that he really wanted to work towards and really wanted to see come into fruition. And now he has the opportunity to make that happen. There's, of course, a ton of different things that, would motivate someone outside of just making money. And yes, long term, maybe he's not going to make nearly as much money as he would, but I can understand if that's his goal and his different motivations that might be fueling him as he does look forward, in a future career in athletics. And also think about it. He may compete in track and field for, 10, 15 years, maybe shorter, but he may be really smart and, really intelligent about how he's going to manage his money. He'll be able to take whatever money he does make, invest it, flip it, and do what he needs to do to make sure that by the time he turns 30 years old, by the time he turns 33, 35, or whatever it is, he set himself up well so he can live comfortably. Doesn't have to be rich, but he can live comfortably, right? Money is not always the absolute answer for every athlete. And again, this is just my assumption, kind of, assuming what could be his goals and his motivation for going professional in track and field. Now, let's also be very clear. Him going professional in track doesn't actually mean that he's leaving college, right? I don't know if he's actually leaving Arkansas. He may be transferring to another school, or he may stay at Arkansas and actually just finish out his degree, right? Doesn't mean that you're leaving your education behind. It just means you're going pro. You can still go to school and also work a job at the same time, right? You can do both. So let's make that very clear. Also, last thing, I don't know if he's going to make the team to USA's. There maybe is a decent chance, but the 100 meters is very competitive. We'll talk about that at another time, but shout out to Jordan Anthony. The 200 though, this is where I was really impressed. Charlie Makarau from Kentucky, 19.84 seconds to get the win, also running out of lane 9. We saw Charlie win the NCAA indoor title right ahead of, fellow Zimbabwe teammate Makaracharamba, but this time outdoors, Charlie got injured at the SEC championships. Maybe there were some questions around if he was going to be able to perform at NCAAs. We saw Makaracharamba absolutely dominating. Jordan Anthony ran sub 20. We saw Kalan, he had run sub 20. We had saw Timars McCollum, he had run sub 20. There was a lot of guys who were really competitive in the 200, but Charlie Makarau, he becomes the first athlete since 2019 with Divine Oduduru from Texas Tech in Nigeria to win both the indoor and the outdoor 200 in the same year at NCAAs. Amazing performance for Charlie, and in my opinion, he might be one of the guys to look out for going into the World Championships this year. He, of course, got 6th place at the Olympic Games final in Paris last year in the 200, and then you also saw Makacharamba finish just behind him in that final as well. I think both these guys representing Zimbabwe, they're going to be really strong threats in the 200 meter landscape as we do go forward. 19.8 for Charlie is already a very big step. Now he might go a little bit further. 19.7 might be on the horizon. 19.6 might be on the horizon. Not saying he's definitely going to do that this year. And of course, the field is very competitive between Kenny Bernard, between Noah Lyles, Letsile Toboho, right? All these different guys are really in the mix in the 200. But don't sleep on Charlie Makarau and what he might be capable of. Now, speaking of the World Championships, I don't know if he's going to get a medal or any thereabouts, but Ezekiel Nathaniel, he of course is really in some great form and is stepping up as one of the 400-meter hurdlers to truly watch. 47.49 seconds to win the 400 hurdles at NCAAs. This comes off of him getting, I think, 5th place in 2022. He got 3rd place in 2023 and 2024, all at NCAAs. Now he caps off his NCAA season, winning the 400 hurdles for Baylor, 47.49 seconds. That makes him the 3rd fastest African in history, only behind Samuel Mutete, who had run 47.1 all the way back in the 1990s. You also had Amadou Diaba from Senegal, I think back in 1988. I think at the Olympic Games, he had run 49 low as well. So now Ezekiel Nathaniel representing Nigeria, he's come through. 47.49 makes him the 3rd fastest African athlete of all time. He's going to be going to the World Championships for Nigeria. He's very likely going to be in the conversation to make the final and maybe push the pace into a top 5 finish. Now, top 3 is absolutely insane. We just saw, Rai Benjamin and Alison Dos Santos run 46.5 and 46.6. We just saw Karsten Warholm, run the world record with 32 seconds in the 300 hurdles. Like, it's a different landscape with those 3 guys. Add in Kyron McMaster. Add in, all these other guys who have run, 47 low. But listen, Ezekiel Nathaniel is slowly but surely getting into that conversation as someone who could start to make some noise. Shout out to Ezekiel for what he did here. Now, on the women's side, a couple different high quality performances that I really did like. You're looking at someone like, in my opinion, the highlight of the meet, Savannah Sutherland in the 400-meter hurdles, representing Michigan, representing Canada, 52.46 seconds to take down Sydney McLaughlin-Levroni's NCAA record of 52.75, set all the way back in 2018. This was an immaculate performance for Savannah, and she left no doubt from the gun that she was going to win this race. She was out clear. By the time she got to 300 meters, she was gone from the rest of the field. A little bit of a challenge, on the inside from Kayla. Not necessarily a challenge, but I don't know. Savannah just went all the way out, and listen, she is in some great form, and I think she is a threat to challenge for a podium spot at the World Championships this year. Now, the hurdles is getting very competitive, let's be clear. And we can assume that Sydney McLaughlin-Levroni as well as Femke Bol, top 2, clear and away. But behind them, it does get very tricky. Yes, you do have Dalilah Muhammad, who just ran 52.9. Yes, you do have Anna Cockrow, who ran 51 to get, the silver medal last year. Yes, you do have Jasmine Jones, who ran 52 to get 4th place at the Olympic Games last year. You have Rochelle Clayton. You have Shamir Little. You have so many women who are in the conversation. The U.S. has their own problems of, picking a team, but Savannah Sutherland is in some excellent form and really rising as a strong talent. She got 7th place at the Olympic Games last year in the final. Do not sleep on what she's capable of. Yes, she's gonna have a good amount of time between now and then also the World Championships, but it would not surprise me to see her improve her performance here, just like she's done in previous years. So shout out to Savannah Sutherland for, 52.46. This was an amazing performance. And she won the NCAA title back in 2023, right? Don't forget what she did back at the Austin NCAA Championships, actually taking down Britton Wilson in that race. Huge shout out to Savannah Sutherland and what she's doing. Canada is going to be making some real noise. I know that you had Sage Watson, of course, was on the rise for some years. Also, even going back to maybe 15 years ago, I'm trying to remember a name. There was another hurdler. She went to Penn State. I think she represented the U.S. for a little bit, but then she switched to Canada. I don't know if she ever made a world or Olympic final, but Canada has had some really strong hurdlers in the 400-meter hurdles on the women's side over the past couple years. Someone in the comments, let me know who I'm thinking of. Went to Penn State back in the 2000, around when Dalilah Muhammad was in college, but I don't know. But amazing performance for Savannah Sutherland. You also did see in the 100 where Samira Moody from USC just edged out the win in 11.14 seconds, slightly ahead of Jamesia Ford, who also ran 11.14. What's interesting here is that Jamesia Ford and Charlton from Florida, they both ran 10.87 seconds in the qualifying rounds on Thursday. So they were looked at as potentially really stepping things up to go into the final, maybe run a little bit even faster, where you saw a couple women run sub 11 seconds in the semifinals. But in the final, of course, didn't pan out like that. You did have Moody getting the gold. Conditions maybe weren't as great as well or equal to what we saw in the qualifying rounds, but shout out to Moody. Jamesia Ford did, of course get the win in the 200, a little bit later that afternoon, running 22.21. Very close race, in that 200 as well. But in the 200-meter heats, she ran 21.98 seconds. Now, it looked like she was, kind of hobbling, maybe not looking as great after that 200, maybe a little injured. South Carolina did pull out of that 4x4, which might have been a reason as to why. I think that was a very smart move because Jamesia Ford looks like someone who's going to have a very, very bright future, running, 10.8, running 21.9. These are performances from someone who's only a sophomore that I think are very much going to translate well when she eventually does get into the professional ranks, whether that is, next year, whether that is in 2 years, whatever time frame she might be on. Someone like Jamesia Ford is very much going to be a threat, if she does continue on this path. So shout out to her performances there, and shout out to all the other athletes at the NCAA championships. This was a great championships. It was really good to be able to lock in for the NCAA regionals, see the athletes that came out of there, went to the NCAA championships, and now see these athletes who performed here and look at how they might do going into the World Championships later on this year. So let me know what your favorite performance from these NCAAs were. Let me know if you think that any of these athletes are actually going to be able to get on the podium, when we get to the World Championships in Tokyo, or if you think some of these athletes are still developing and might make some noise in some of the future years. Let me know what you think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Always do appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.